Christian booksellers meet annually to promote their $3 billion industry. Among them are a small but growing number who believe that end-time events are literally foretold in the Bible.
Thanks so much for taking the time to write. You make a difference.
Well, thank you.
Apocalyptic literature is the fastest growing part of the business, inspired largely by the success of one man.
I tried to take the complexity of prophecy and to show that there was a very specific scenario that the prophets predicted would all come together in history shortly before the return of Christ.
Lindsay's first book, The Late Great Planet Earth, became the non-fiction bestseller of the 1970s, crossing over from Christians to a worldwide readership of over 25 million.
Hal Lindsey publishes a book, The Late Great Planet Earth, which is really a popularization of John Darby's system. Theologically, there's nothing new there. What he does is link it to current events.
The pivotal event in Lindsay's scenario was the Arab-Israeli War and the return of Jerusalem to Jewish hands.
Defense Minister Dayan says, "We have returned to the holiest of our holy places."
With the Israeli recapture of Jerusalem, you get a kind of visceral excitement which runs all through Christian prophecy believers. This was the event which I think really served as a kind of impetus for a whole generation of prophetic interpretation.
There are 5 Bible signs of the terminal generation.
The first and most important was the rebirth of the nation Israel.
Isaiah 66:8 says, "A nation shall be reborn in a day," and that happened in May 1948.
The increase of earthquakes, increase of famine, increase of plague.
In the Bible, pestilence is a disease that cannot be cured. For our generation, that's AIDS. Daniel said in chapter 12, in the end of time, there would be a knowledge explosion. We are the generation that has the information highway. You can literally drown yourself with information.
We're told that 2 of God's witnesses in the future will be killed by the Antichrist, and the whole world will witness this event at the same time. With CNN and worldwide instantaneous visual communication, for the first time in history, this prophecy is capable of being fulfilled in our lifetime, and that, I believe, is one more significant indication that we're living in the age when we can expect the Messiah.
As far as I'm concerned, I could disappear off this television set while I'm talking to you. There's nothing left in the Bible to happen before the rapture of the church.
This is WNN.
The United States of America is officially at war. Meanwhile,
combining news clips with specially shot footage, Christian filmmakers dramatize for their audience what events like the rapture may look like.
And perhaps, oh my God, Charlie, this is impossible. This is just impossible. I just can't believe it. I don't know what to say. My cameraman, Charles Tappan, he's just disappeared right in front of me.
Someone took my baby.
With the rapture, the prophetic clock begins to tick again, and at that point, events will unfold very quickly and very dramatically.
Next comes the tribulation, a 7-year period of catastrophe and chaos that precedes the return of Christ and the Battle of Armageddon.
We need to be warning a lost world that judgment is coming. And the carnage is so horrible that most of the population on the earth during the tribulation will be annihilated. This final devastation will actually
Popular
be
ministers like Jerry Falwell preach these events to an audience numbering in the tens of millions.
Now you need to note that you will not be here. If you're a believer, you will not be here. This is not intended to frighten saints. Not one saint will spend one moment in the tribulation period. We will have gone up in the rapture. I believe in the pre-millennial coming of Christ.
At times, believers have chosen not to wait for Jesus to rapture them.
we came to offer a doorway to the kingdom of God at the end of this civilization, the end of this millennium.
The Christian New Age group Heaven's Gate castrated and then killed themselves in preparation for what they called the next level. The links of such groups to Revelation have often been tenuous. But one young man named Vernon Howell, in a splinter group of the Seventh-day Adventists, developed his vision directly from the ideas of William Miller.
Vernon Howell went to Jerusalem and rented an apartment, and he began to study with some of the rabbis, the Orthodox rabbis in Israel. And he was an avid student of the Bible.
Howell went to Jerusalem to see if it was physically possible during the tribulation for 144,000 of God's faithful to gather on the Temple Mount to be saved.
While he was there, he had the experience that changed his whole life. He reports the experience of ecstatically being caught up into heaven, like the author of the book of Revelation, seeing heaven open.
The Russian cosmonauts gave the report that they saw 7 angelic beings flying towards Earth with the wings of the size of a jumbo jet. Okay, so what happened was in 1985 when I was in Israel, I met up with those people. Seriously.
You met up with who now? The 2 cosmonauts?
No. See, the Russian cosmonauts were in their space station.
Right.
And they radioed down to their headquarters. They were terrified.
Right.
But they saw 7 angelic beings moving towards the Earth.
Okay, and you met these 7 angelic beings.
Exactly.
From that moment on, he says, I instantaneously and suddenly, in a moment, understood completely all the mysteries of the Bible. He came back, he changed his name to David Koresh, as we now know him, and took on then that new persona, that new identity, as the final revelator or Christ figure.
Koresh took his name from the Hebrew for Cyrus, the Persian king who delivered the Jews from Babylon. The Branch Davidians in Waco, Texas, were also waiting to be delivered.
David Koresh taught his followers that they were living in Babylon. The U.S. government was the fulfillment of the scriptural prophecy, and that Babylon was the persecutor of the saints. If you were a member of the group and maybe you doubted Koresh's teaching, when the tanks appear outside and the black helicopters appear overhead, how could you doubt any more?
At first, Koresh thought news coverage of the standoff would attract the 144,000 followers he would take to Jerusalem to be saved. He tried repeatedly to convince the FBI of his logic.
You won't even know what chapter 7 teaches when it shows the Lamb stands on Mount Zion with 144,000 having the seal of the Father in their forehead.
But where are the 144,000?
They're out here in this country. They're out here in this world. Now let me explain. Remember I told you God says to wait?
Okay.
Things are happening you don't understand right now.
Okay.
When David Koresh interpreted the Bible for the FBI negotiators, they could only see this as what they called Bible babble. The phrase Bible babble indicates a real failure to come to grips with what was going on there.
David Koresh envisioned his group actually ending up in Jerusalem. And so Waco in '93, for him, was clearly a surprise. It didn't seem to fit any prophecies of the Bible that he had expounded. The footage that we see now with the noise and the lights at night pressuring the group, he had to go back to his text and wonder, well, maybe this is the end. Maybe there's something I've missed, you see. And so by handling the situation in the way that it was handled, the government really delivered to David, I guess we could call it an early apocalypse.
The time to come out is now. If you can't see your way through, walk towards the sound of the speakers. David, don't do this to your people.